Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today we are thinking about midlife crisis. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is a thinker and something we really need to think about. So I have Karen here who's going to help us think about this in a way that will keep us thinking. Goodness, I got tongue-tied. Thank you so much, Karen, for coming on to my show and sharing your time and your perspective with me. I really appreciate it. Let's go ahead and just dive right in. What does midlife crisis, what does that make you think about?
Well, I think the term, it's such a loaded term, and we can certainly talk about why it's been, termed a crisis. That's kind of an interesting conversation in and
Yeah.
of itself. But I'll begin kind of at the beginning with
Yeah.
what is actually happening, to a woman during this stage. And I think it's really not so much a crisis as kind of an awakening. It's the time where most women rethink their people pleasing and perfectionist tendencies. They kind of rethink the way they've lived the first half of their life.
Mhm.
And they start asking the hard questions of, who am I and what do I want? And what is going to bring me joy and fulfillment in the second half of my life? And it's so interesting to me that, menopause is characterized by all these physical changes and challenges. I think in many ways, it's almost like our body telling us you can no longer operate the way you have been. Like we're now
Mhm.
at a point where we need to just do things differently from here on out. So
Absolutely.
that's what's actually happening. It's actually, I think a really beautiful opportunity for women. The funny thing about it being termed a crisis is that I think it can sometimes be a crisis for the people around us because they've gotten used to us operating in a certain way.
Yes.
And suddenly it's like the ground is shifting beneath their feet because they're with this woman who has had certain patterns of behaving. And all of a sudden, she's not behaving the way that she used to. She's not doing
Yeah.
things the way that she used to. So it certainly can be a crisis for others. And I think, unfortunately, it can be a crisis for the woman who really is clinging to the past, who really
Yeah.
is kind of resisting the change and fighting it and wanting to look the way she looked 10 years prior and wanting, all of her relationships to feel like they did 10 years prior. I think, that's when that resistance comes up, that can make a woman feel like she's in a crisis,
Yeah.
but I do think it's just a real opportunity and a real awakening if we kind of reframe it that way.
I love that reframe. I love it. You know why? Because it reminds people that that's internal work. You have
Mm,
to remind yourself about the internal work that you have
yeah.
within yourself. And the fact that you said that you cannot live in this season, your new season of your life, as you did in your previous season, is a statement that I wish so many people can just grasp because you cannot operate in the same function. And I think technology reminds us of this function. You know what I mean? Of this type of thinking. Because when you buy a technology that works and it's been working for years and years and years, but the company decides to make it obsolete because it wants you to upgrade, it's gonna make it impossible for you to just refresh yourself the way that you used to with its previous updates naturally. And now you're gonna have to just do something completely different, and that's buy a new technology or and buy a new wardrobe or get a new frame of thinking. You know what I mean? These type of concepts people need to start grasping now at a young age and start implementing in their lives slowly so that they can realize that when it happens, it's not a crisis, like you said. And it's a crisis. I love when you said it's a crisis for everybody else around them because it's true. When somebody is so used of your expectations and your patterns that they became accustomed to, that they were able to feed off of and use for their own benefit, it's going to cause them a whole new type of turmoil where they're not going to want to be around you until you figure out yourself. And then they'll come back around and be like, okay, where do I fit in? And I think that's something that people don't realize. And that's one thing that I had a guest on my show and we talked about aging gracefully. And she was saying how aging gracefully is just modifying your life. You know what I mean? No longer doing things as you used to. And I think that comes up perfectly here is because when you are coming to an age where you feel like you're going through this midlife crisis, you know what I mean? You have to start modifying it, you know? And like you said earlier, it's like changing the way that you dress, changing the way that you eat, you know what I mean? Because after a certain point, you can't eat the same foods that you used to when you were really young. So once we realize that, like, we have to adapt within ourselves, I
Mhm.
think that would be a great way to start just riding the boat instead of going against the currents. On your opinion, what was I mean, did you have to face a midlife? Did you face a midlife crisis yourself, and that's where you come to this realization, or how did this
Yeah.
idea come to you?
So I had what I call kind of a perfect storm in that the year
Okay.
that I started really having, symptoms of perimenopause just so happened to be the year that I ended a 24-year marriage. So I had, these physical things going on, but I also had all of these emotional things going on. And quite frankly, I didn't really know where to begin. I kind of felt like I was physically depleted and exhausted,
Yeah.
but I knew that I was also facing a lot of anxiety, which I now, have since learned is one of the most common symptoms of perimenopause. But I didn't
Yeah.
know where it was coming from. So I went through about a year. Now I had been trained as a health coach already. So that was
Okay.
even more frustrating, right? Because I'm doing everything quote unquote right, and I'm still feeling
Right?
terrible and I'm not sleeping. And it was just such a crazy time. So I had to try to figure that piece out and also get myself to a place where I felt emotionally strong. Because what I kind of learned is that you can't tackle you can't really transition in a healthy way unless you're looking at both of those things, right? We have to be
Yeah.
taking care of ourselves physically and we have to be taking care of ourselves emotionally. If
Yeah.
if you if you try to do it and you're focused solely in one area, it's going to be so much harder. Because, how can you really change your diet and start exercising and start doing things differently if you're emotionally a wreck? And
Yeah.
conversely, how can you deal with the emotional issues if you're physically depleted? So you really kind of, I realized I needed an approach that would address both of those things. So
Yeah.
I went through at that point some advanced certifications in women's wellness. I became certified as a life coach. I kind of said, if I can't find the expert that I need who can help me in both of these areas, then I need to become that expert. And
Yeah.
I made it my work over a period of about a year, 18 months to learn as much as I can about all of these things, what a woman in midlife faces physically and emotionally. And I think a big part of it for me was, you use the analogy, which I love, of the computer, right? That's what it felt like. It felt like I was updating the operating system. It felt like I had to reprogram all of the things that I had learned.
Yeah.
I had to reprogram all of my relationships, and people are
Yeah.
very well meaning. Even the people who love us the most, they've just gotten used to us reacting and responding and behaving in a certain way. So it's not always that they are ill intentioned. It's that,
Yeah.
we're just breaking a long held pattern and everybody's got to get used to it, including us, right? We
Yeah.
have to, suddenly live what I call a you centered life. We
Yeah.
don't do that typically in the first half of our life. We're very centered on other people and other things. Maybe we're building a career and we're very centered on our boss and what the company wants and needs. Maybe we're raising a family and we're very centered on our kids. There's not really a lot of time in our adult life where we live a life that is, that where we are at the center of it. And I think
Yeah.
this for me was the biggest change, is that I suddenly said, you know what? Nobody's coming to save me. Nobody's going to fix all my problems. Like, I
Hmm.
have to take 100% responsibility for me. And
Hmm.
I have to realize that my greatest power is my power to choose. So the choices I make have to be really intentional and they have to be really goal focused. I had to
Yeah,
get really clear on what I wanted.
absolutely. And I think that's a valid point that people need to remind ourselves. And it just reminds ourselves the crucialness of knowing how to love yourself, knowing how you receive love, and then start implementing it in your life. You know what I mean? And like you said, be your own savior. No one's gonna come and carry you off in your away in your dungeon, because let's be honest, you're in a dungeon at this point because you're not escaping from the repetitive thoughts and the naysayers, the negativity, the intrusiveness that comes into your mind that we don't acknowledge because we get so comfortable in it. You know what I mean? Because if the operating system isn't refreshing the way it needs to, we think, oh, okay, we're the problems. And then we feed ourselves these negative thoughts, negative, negative. And it's like, no. And it's like you made that choice and you made that acknowledgement. Like, this is my selfless season. I'm my selfish season. I'm going to be selfish and I don't care because I need to learn to love me again. And once I love me again, you know what? Then I'll see where my next season is. And if that means to serve, then I'll serve. If that means to do this, then I'll do this. But right now, this is my focus. And sometimes we need to have that tunnel vision, you know what I mean, when it comes to that, because oh my goodness, that's our healing time. You know what I mean? We're healing certain things. And I think as a woman, we get stuck in certain stages in our life sometimes, especially at a young age. You know what I mean? Because we were so, sometimes people are just so free, careless at the beginning before they have kids, and then once they have kids, they have to just serve. You know what I mean? And just be selfless and just do and submit and do all these things for your children. And then people get stuck in that season for so long. And they forget like it's a season. If that season is for 3 years, 5 years, okay, that's 5 years. But at that 6 year mark, once it's done, then you're done. Release that, let it go, and keep moving forward and figure out what season is, what new season you're in right now. And when you're walking and allowing yourself to be awakened in that moment, that self awareness, then you're able to see, okay, so this is the season I'm in. This is my selfish season. I can start taking care of myself. I can start figuring out why I'm breaking out the way that I am, that I shouldn't, why I'm losing hair the way that I am. You know what I mean? Why clothes aren't fitting me the way that I know that they should. You know what I mean? Things of those small increments that may seem like nothing to somebody else is important to you. And if it's important to you, validate it. You know what I mean? Validate your feelings, validate what's going on, but don't validate the actions as an excuse to not take care of yourself or not to show somebody else maybe this is your season to do this. You know what I mean? Because everybody has different seasons. And if we allow ourselves to accept the season that we are in, then we can encourage somebody else to do their season and embrace it. But the one thing that I've realized and it irks me is that people won't appreciate when somebody is having a selfish season. You know what I mean? Like if your season is to grow and to be all that you can be and you set your boundaries up, oh, do people hate those boundaries
Oh,
when
yeah.
they are set? Am I right? I mean, how many times have you had to implement your boundaries when it was your time?
Yeah. Well, and I think, you bring up another great word, which is selfish, right? We have to stop regarding selfishness as a bad thing.
Yeah,
There is a way that selfishness is actually very healthy. I mean, if
it
we are
is.
not the center of our lives, then who is? Like, who should be the center of our lives but us? And when we are, and when we take care of ourselves, we can be so much more for everybody around us. So we have to stop
Yes.
sort of, we have such a negative connotation with that word selfish.
Yes.
I think
Mm.
again, I think it's a healthy way to be, and it's actually, the only way to live a really healthy, happy, fulfilled second half of life. I think that's why the second half of life is so amazing. I kind of, the more I'm in it, I mean, I'm 55 years old, and the more I'm in it, I'm like, this is the best. Like,
Yes.
the fact that my kids are grown and they're more independent, and I have so much more freedom and I have more time and I have more financial resources. I think if we could reframe the second half of life, and think of it as the opportunity that it is.
Mm-hmm.
None of us would be depressed about aging. We'd be like, bring it on, because guess what? I can create amazing things in this half of my life because I'm not juggling all that I was in the
Yeah.
first half of my life. And I'm not torn, I'm not pulled in so many different directions. And I think that
Yeah.
what the point you raise about boundaries and the seasons of life, and I think that it's we have to get comfortable being judged.
Yes.
When I was younger, I worried
Yes.
so much about if people thought I was nice or if people thought I was, agreeable. I think when we reach this stage, we have to let all that go, because that is all
Mhm.
tied up in people pleasing and perfectionism, right?
Yep.
Those are two things we 100% need to let go.
Yes.
And we need to be like, okay, I know that some people are going to judge me for
Hmm.
being quote unquote selfish, for putting myself first, for, you know, making myself a priority. And I'm 100% okay with that. Like
Right.
that's the place we need to get to, the place where we say the people, people aren't going to like it. And I am comfortable letting people go. That's a scary place to be for a lot of women. But I think that what you find as we age is that, the same way that everything changes, our body, our mindset, our
Yeah.
perhaps our job, our career, our home, it's completely logical that our social circle can and will change as well. And
Yeah.
sometimes as we evolve, we have to leave certain people and things behind. There's a shedding, there's a letting go that we have to get comfortable with. And when we
Absolutely.
do, and when we can be okay with being judged, with people not liking us, with doing things imperfectly,
Hmm.
and perhaps with losing people, when we
Yeah.
really get good at that, we are infinitely more powerful in our lives.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Someone once told me, life is like an elevator. We're all going on different stops. We all may try to ride to the top together, but we won't always go there together. And that always stuck with me because it made me realize like you're going to go through changes. You're going to get on different floors. You're going to go up. You're going to go down. You're going to meet people along the way. And some people we're going to do great things together, and some people you are not. But as soon as you accept the fact that this is life and you're just supposed to embrace everything that comes with it and the emotions that comes with it, the trials, the lessons, the everything, it gives you such a type of gratitude that is so beautiful because you can live with such a grace. And I love speaking with well-aged individuals. And I like to say well-aged instead of old because I don't think you're old. I think you're just well-aged. You know what I mean? You have a type of wisdom, a type
Like
of
a
grace,
fine wine.
Exactly. It's like a fine wine. So that's what I tell people because I've spoken to people who because I used to be a CNA now right out of high school. So it was a great experience for me because I got to speak with people in their 90s and meet people who are 100 years old. And my perspective of old changed in a snap of a finger. You know what I mean? So now when I meet people who are 50, I'm like, you're not even halfway there yet. You know what I mean? You're not even halfway through your life. And the people who are like in their 80s and 90s, oh my goodness, their filter is so different because they don't care. What are you gonna do to me? You know, what's gonna really happen? And I
Yeah,
just realized like if you get upset over what somebody else says, that comes down to you need to do some more healing. That
that's right.
sounds like a personal problem. And
Absolutely.
once I started saying that to people, I'm like, well, that sounds like a personal problem. Like people are upset, like, how dare you say? I'm like, well, that sounds like another personal problem.
Yeah,
Because if I'm healed, I'm not going to be offended. And if I have understanding, then I won't be resentful. Because I was speaking to somebody else and they were talking, I was talking about how understanding is gonna give you two options, compassion or resentment. You choose where you want to go with that understanding. And if you choose resentment, acknowledge that's the choice that you choose. But don't come at me as if I'm the bad guy when you chose to do the resentment portion and the resentment option. You know what I mean? So it is very interesting. Goodness, I feel like I could talk to you about this topic. It's continuing
Yeah.
on, but time is catching up to us. So, what can be some lasting words of wisdom that you can leave us off with to keep on thinking?
Well, I think we've talked a lot about responsibility, right? And the
Mhm.
fact that we unfortunately many women spend a lot of their lives outsourcing their happiness, meaning
Yes.
we're looking to other people to make us happy, to make us feel fulfilled, to bring us joy, to make us feel validated and accepted and loved. I think
Yeah.
when we reach the point, this point in our lives, one of the crucial elements is that we accept 100% responsibility. Nobody
Yeah.
makes us feel anything. We feel what we feel because of the thoughts that we're thinking. So it goes back to what we were saying about reprogramming the operating system, right?
Yeah.
We have to accept responsibility. And that means, as you said, it's a personal problem, right? It's something we have to deal with, within our own thoughts and our own mindset. So I guess, my advice to women would be start there. Start by
Mhm.
just simply taking 100% responsibility. And when you do that, and when you really commit to the work of, taking care of your mindset, owning your own experience and creating your own happiness, that's where the magic happens.
Exactly. Exactly. That's where the magic happens. Goodness, what a great conversation. And what a great points to keep us thinking because we have to have that self-awareness and we have to have that accountability so that we can honor our feelings and still honor our promises and continue forward. You know what I mean? And live such a noble, graceful life just going forward. Why? Because we deserve it for ourselves, not for anybody else, for
Absolutely.
ourselves. Why? Because we have to deal with us and be with ourselves 24/7. Goodness.
Yeah.
So stop choosing other people and choose you and start focusing on healing what's going on inside you because I'm pretty sure there's your body's telling you, your mind is telling you, like we connect within ourselves in such a way that it's sad to see people ignore it. You know what I mean? It's really sad. So if anybody wants to know more about Karen and all that she has to offer the world, because how could you not with this conversation? Am I right? Please check her out. I have her lovely photo on my website along with her website. Just boop, just click right there and you can continue on thinking with all the great content that she has to share. So, with that being said,